This is Stove1, an exciting little multi-purpose cooker stove that I've designed. And my name's Pete. I'm based in Albury, New South Wales. I'm a lifelong sort of expeditioner, bushwalker, camper, traveller. Wear lots of different hats. But after a pretty big expedition last year where I was out in the field for 100 days, the penny sort of dropped, and I thought maybe I might come up with a way to try and rethink the way I approach carrying fuel and generating heat for basically cooking and rehydrating meals and making hot drinks. So essentially the short version of my story is, on that trip I was in the field for 100 days. And in being in the field for 100 days, excuse me, it's coffee time. In being in the field for 100 days, I had no support crew, and I ended up having to take 4 of these half-litre isobutane canisters with a burner. Now, don't get me wrong, the burners are amazing, and they're actually a bit of a go-to for a lot of the ultralight set for bushwalking and overlanding and hiking and trekking, especially mountaineering where you don't have access to alternative fuels. And you sort of, in a lot of places, it's a requirement that you don't have sort of out of control naked fire. But anyway, that was actually, in my case, quite restrictive. I was bound to the fuel, and I had to carry the fuel up to 100 days in advance. And I thought, well, maybe if I come up with something, because the thing that struck me on the trip was there was biofuel everywhere. And I had the ability, with the regulations and laws here, to be able to have open fires. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a multi-fuel cooker that I could choose how I use it? So I could run it with fuel tablets or run it with an alcohol burner. Or run it with biofuel most of the time, and then have it as a fail-safe to switch to one of the other fuel types. So in my case, for that trip, because it was the sort of tail end of our dry period, I could have made little fires the whole way down in a Stove1, in something like this, to get that job done. And then on the days where I wasn't allowed to have a fire as such, and I had to burn gas, I could have had it available and potentially just carried one small canister like this with a burner, and the rest of the time just burnt biofuel. Or I could have just burnt biofuel and taken, for the entire trip, one bottle of alcohol or methylated spirits, which is what we call it in Australia, and use a magic little number like this classic Trangia burner to make enough heat to do the exact same job really efficiently. So I got the notepad out and sketched out some ideas. A couple were just, a bit far-fetched, but one sort of started to sort of take shape. And I basically took some technology from Performance Motorsports with the extruded titanium and the trucking industry, and got in touch with, partnered up with a CAD designer, and then an engineer, and we used CNC machines and laser machines to form this up. So this is what a new one looks like. Stove1, it essentially combines a pot stand, which this is, and a furnace. You might have seen a lot of fire pits. In Australia, we make fire pits out of old dryer drums and washing machine drums that have these perforations in them. So this is really miniaturizing that idea, where you've got really good airflow in at the base and then out at the top to sort of evenly spread heat around your cooking receptacle. So this is our little fuel window. So when you are cooking on it and you the fire burns down a bit, you can sort of top up the bed of coals with some additional fuel to keep your fire going and keep the heat up. This is a windscreen in the front here. So if it was a little bit windy, you could face this up into the wind and it'll protect the core of your fire. And like any camping stove, it's not like you're restricted to using this alone. So if you were in a really high wind area, you could get out your trowel and dig it down into the ground so it was below wind height to shield it. Or you could put a foil, like you would with an isobutane burner, put up a wind block, folding foil. That's a really common thing to do when you're cooking and you're camping. So you can kind of blend this in with the things that you have. My favorite way of using this is actually with the Trangia burner. So you literally just stick this on the flat bit of ground, light it up and wait for it to bloom. And then just literally place your Stove1 over the top of that. And then grab your cook pot and pop it on top. And it actually works really beautifully. Once it blooms up and it sort of fills up the chamber with flame, and you can actually even use your little simmer ring, which you can control the and I've got no affiliation with Trangia, but that'll allow you to control the amount of flame, and it'll work up to about 50% open inside the Stove1. So you basically set that up in advance and then pop your screen over the top like that. So you can kind of mix and match how you do it, but basically that in the case of a Trangia, that could constitute a massive weight saving, where you don't have to have the huge base and the number of massive pots. If you're only ever going to, which I did on my trip, most of the time I was rehydrating meals like this Radix meal. And these small ones, I think this is like 130 mil of water, and the big ones are like around 170 odd mils, which isn't much. So in a pot like this, if I was making coffee, I'd probably do a third to a half full, and the same again for a large meal. So you don't need much of a burn. That's the thing. So in wood burning mode, the key to getting it working well with a Stove1 is to prep your fuel first. So have a really good tinder source. So you could pack some tinder, like dryer lint mixed into, or cotton balls mixed with petroleum jelly, or you can get wood chips with wax, candle wax. So you can melt it into like an ice cube tray with some wood chips and light the corner of one of those, and then put your fine sticks and thicker sticks around it inside this. And really the idea with this is you get it up to temperature before you put your pot on. So you build a fire, get it going consistently, and have your prepared fuel. So you break sticks down to about 10 centimeters or less, up to, this will accommodate a 2.5 centimeter diameter stick, which is pretty solid through this fuel window here. But if you've got sticks that are less than 10 centimeters, what you do is angle them down, and they naturally fall into and slide down into the Stove1 while you're using it. The key is preparation. So you're not going to grab a little bit of tinder and pop it in here and then light it and then think, oh, well, I'll go over and grab another stick. Just do all that work first before you, and you'll get the feel for it pretty quick. You'll get a sense for how much fuel you're going to need. And literally in where we are, that would just constitute grabbing 4 decent sized sticks off the ground, breaking them down into a pile or 2 piles, really fine ones, and the heavier ones. And then you just graduate up through the sizes of those sticks from the finest to the heaviest to get your fire established. The Stove1, this is one that's been used. So you'll actually see, and there's photos of it below on the Kickstarter, where it's anodized colors. So where this is white, that's where the hottest portion of the stove is. And this one's primarily been used with an alcohol burner. So with the alcohol burner, you can see there's a bit of freeboard where there's no holes at the top edge here. That actually prevents the flame directly hitting your pot or pan. So a problem, and this is something I found adventuring over the years, if you use a pot like this, and let's say you were going to make ravioli. If you were boil it and prepared your ravioli and you were going to put some sauce in there, when you strain off the water and put the ravioli back in to add the sauce to warm it through, if you've got a naked flame on this ultra thin titanium, and this is probably 1/4 to 1/2 mil thick, what happens is you get a super hot patch and it will burn really quickly onto the surface on the inside of the pot. So what this does is it's got a bit of a thermal barrier. So you get this oxygen depleted area that's kind of sealed off against the bottom edge of your pot. And it prevents that super hot flame constantly kind of bombarding one area, which evens out the temperature. And we've found that to an extent, it reduces the likelihood you're going to have that burning happening, which is pretty cool. So, and there's also a bit of freeboard at the bottom. So when you're in wood burning mode and you've got this sitting on the ground, and this is what it's designed to be. There's no moving parts. There's no pins, no panels, no hinges. This is it. It is, as far as I'm aware, the thickest walled cooker that's available anywhere from anyone at 1.5 mil thick. It's an absolute tank. And we've designed it because we don't have all those extra parts, which in doing the design, we kind of looked at them as a bit superfluous. So for something that doesn't need to be physically that big to achieve, preparing a meal or that liquids that are only that small volume, why do you need something that's 1 foot high? Or why do you need something that, you got to piece together and balance pins inside it to put a burner on it? What's wrong with putting the burner on the ground and then putting this over the top? It's beautifully easy. There's nothing you need to do. You pull this out of your bag. If you've got it in a stuff sack, you pull it out of the stuff sack, light your burner, sit it on a flat bit of ground, drop this over it, put your pot on top, and you're away. From that point of view, it also has a lot of potential, the design for military applications. So you can imagine in the military, signatures and being visible or lack of visibility is kind of a critical factor. If you have hexamine tablets or SBIT tablets, which are smoke-free, and they'll burn for 10 to 15 minutes each, you pop one of these in under this and light it up and you mess tin on top and away you go. And the beauty of this is there's nothing, again, overly heavy about it. It's 160 grams or 5.99 ounces, 110 mil high, and it's around 90 mil wide. So you can imagine it's the height of a soft drink or soda can, and probably the diameter's 15-20% wider than that. So, but it's wide enough to give a really nice stable base for a pot or a pan. So something like this one here, this is an MSR. I think this is a 700 mil pot. You can see it actually takes up most of the real estate on the base of that pot. And this pot's been used with this cooker. You can see a fair bit in testing. So yeah, for the military, if you were issued this in the army, you'd have it for your entire duration. And we've designed this if you were given one. Our goal is for you to have access to something for life that you can use as a tool. That if SHTF, the shit hit the fan, and you had something like this and you had no access to any paid fuel like alcohol or fuel tablets or anything that you needed to pay for, as long as you had material you could burn, this would keep serving you. And that's the idea. That's the foundation of the idea, that no matter what, you're always going to have, in most instances, the ability to make, unless you're above, like up in the snow or an Arctic area or above the tree line, where you may not have access to combustible fuel, but that this would serve you for life in every other instance. And then be, versatile, and you can use a Trangia burner above the snow line, no problem. So you could still use it effectively as a windscreen and a pot stand. So there you go. There is one little accessory that we have at the moment, and it's got some limited use. This is something that we came up with to sort of refine the design for certain applications. So if you were using it with a Trangia burner, let's say, and you had a little espresso maker or something you wanted to, that was sort of narrower than this sort of size, you could pop this on as a hot plate, and it's actually thicker again. This is 3 mil thick, but it's got a bit of thermal mass in it in terms of the actual volume of titanium. And this is all solid titanium. Not too sure where my pot grippers are, but your pot grippers, if you were using this with a trangia, you would need to either let the trangia burn out completely before you attempted to remove this, just to keep things safe, or put your pot grippers through the window here and lift it by the front of the door if you were using this lid. This isn't something that lends itself to, putting this lid on the base like that and then putting your trangia burner inside it and then thinking you're going to be able to safely lift it from the top edge, because the base could just fall out. So there's a recess there that kind of nestles in. But if you were happy just to let your trangia burner burn out and just let itself run out of fuel, that's fine. You could just leave it on there and just let it burn out, use up the fuel that's in there, or a fuel tablet. If you were going to use this in the army, let's say, and you wanted to keep the fuel tablet off the ground, you could just pop your fuel tablet in there, cook on it, take your cooker off and just let it run out, burn out, let this cool down, pull it apart and put it back in your kit. So it takes a bit of, like I said, it's like a hammer. Your hammer's only half the equation. You've got to get the nails and figure out how to use it. And that's our philosophy with this. You've got to figure out the way it's going to work best for you. But at its essence, this is the Stove1, this single piece here that does 99% of everything. So we will come up with a few accessories, and that little hot plate, base plate will be available if you want to play around with one. But essentially, if you order one from our Kickstarter, just a note on pricing, they will be recommended retail when we make these available worldwide, given they're made out of what they are, and we've done what we have to make them in terms of precision engineering and what goes into it. The retail price will be 150 Australian dollars and 99 or 95, I'm not too sure, I think 99 Australian dollars or thereabouts. I'd like to keep it under 100 for the Kickstarter, just to reward our backers. And then we'll revert to the full retail price for anyone that buys it online. And that may change, if we can get enough volume and we can refine our production process. We'll do everything we can to keep the price down. But with the price of titanium, and just to finish on that, we could have designed it out of what you see 95% of the wood-fired stoves, Amazon wood-fired cookers, and some of the fancier ones that are out there. They're typically sheet titanium that is pressed into a shape. So if you just think of something like a soft drink can, where creases and ridges are pressed into very thin material. Soft drink cans, aluminium cans are ultra thin. And it's the shaping of it and the construction of it, the way it's all fit together and folded and pinned and hinged together, is what gives it its structural rigidity. We could have done that. We could have come up with this shape and made it 0.5 mil thick and had it more than strong enough to hold a pot, and sort of argued that it was a weight-saving idea. It's actually too much of a compromise. If we're aiming for this to last you a lifetime, we think a few extra grams, another 60 grams of weight that you'd have to handle, which isn't really terribly much, for something that is never going to fail you, we think that's a good value equation. But what that means is we pay more for the material up front. It's not a veneer of the material, where we get to call it titanium, but it's kind of intrinsically flawed. We don't want anything intrinsically flawed. So if anyone can find one that a stove or cooker that's 1.5 millimeters thick in the wall thickness, I would be very surprised. So it's a really high quality item, and it's designed to be a tool. It's not a flashy thing that we want to engage your emotions on and, sunsets and adventures and all that sort of thing. This is a dependable tool. We want you to know that you've got something in your bag that's going to blend with all these fuel sources and give you a really good versatile solution that if it really hit the fan, you could still use it to cook no matter what. And sort of be lightweight, nimble, fast, and just have things boiled down to their essence. So thanks for your time. It's more than enough talking from me. I hope that gives you a really good sense of where we've come from in terms of our why and what this is all about. And you'll be able to read a bit more about the story of my expedition that I did that was the foundation of this as a concept down below or on the stove1.com website. And get your Kickstarter order in and would really love to get one out to you and see what you think. Righto. All the best. See you later.